In this video, we will be tasting and talking about batch number 79 of the Eco Cha Tea Club, a roasted Shan Lin High Mountain Oolong Tea. Batch number 79 of the Eco Cha Tea Club is a roasted Shan Lin High Mountain Oolong Tea. It's actually the same batch as our winter 2021 harvest that we shared in its normal unroasted form. And our good friend who entered a different day of the same harvest from the same farm made by the same people into the Lugu Farmers Association Dongding Oolong Tea competition received To Deng Jiang, which is an award within the top 2% of all entries. And that's like over 6,000 entries total. So it's a valuable and very prestigious reward that he received. And since we had happened to buy two bulk bags of tea, we decided to take a little risk and not have enough of our Shan Lin High Mountain Oolong Tea to last until spring, so that we could ask him to roast the same tea, basically, different day of harvest, as I said, but same farm, same tea makers, to roast it in the same way that he did for the prize-winning tea. And he agreed to do that. So he took our bulk bag of tea, had the stems removed. That's a service provided using a scanner and a clipping machine. It's a new technology here in Taiwan in the last 10 years or so, which has alleviated people from having to actually de-stem each rolled clump of leaves, which is obviously very time consuming. So these, our normal batch of High Mountain Oolong Tea from our Shan Lin source was de-stemmed, and then he roasted it 3 times for a total of about 22 hours in the same way that he did for the award-winning batch. And so now we have, in effect, or at least very similar to the To Deng Jiang, the top 2% top category award from Winter 2021 Lugu Farmers Association Dongding Oolong Tea competition, which is the largest oolong tea competition in the world. It's definitely the most prestigious here in Taiwan, and it receives the most value for high-ranking awards. I brewed 13.5 grams of tea in a 180 milliliter pot, first for 1 minute 10 seconds, then for 1 minute, then for 1 minute 10 seconds again, and then for 1 minute 40. The 5th brew was brewed for a little longer than that, probably close to 2 minutes. So let's have a sip. These, it's allowed to cool down to almost room temperature, which is allowed. It's nice to smell the aroma coming off the brewed leaves as the leaves are brewing. But beyond that, if you really want to get a full package of flavor, it's best to let tea cool down to really get to know it a little more. Well, the first thing I'm prompted to say is, if I had to choose one type of tea in the world that I could only have one type for the rest of my life, this would be it. Suffice it to say, it's a very full-flavored, complex, and delicious type of tea. I'm fully goosebumping out right now. I'm just gonna have a quick run through here. 2nd brew, 1 minute. The roast factor is evident. It's not at all burny, charcoaly, or coal, you know, that kind of campfire-y, smoky thing. It's just a mellow, rich, somewhat bold, and I often think of roasted yams, pumpkin pie, winter vegetables, sometimes parsnips. Definitely sweet, nutty. Roasted pecans comes to mind right now. It's that combination of caramelized, nutty, a little bit of woody, and a tiny bit of smoke. Something also reminds me of pine forest. Shan Lin actually means cedar forest. Shi is a name, a word for river in Mandarin. So it's Cedar Forest River is the place name. Very nice mouthfeel. By the fourth brew, there's a little bit of a tiny bite, a stringent bite in the finish, but it really just makes the flavors pop more. Okay, I'm going to circle back to the first brew. There's something like, I don't know, ale or mead or something a little bit syrupy almost, and just that tang. It just kind of, the way it just hits the back of your palate is amazing in my humble opinion. It's not quite as thickly sweet as caramel. It's a little bit more like a, maple syrup would be kind of getting distracted with the maple aspect, but a kind of thinner syrupy kind of aspect to the sweetness. Not so full on, I guess. Fourth brew holding strong, very balanced still. The complexity, the tangy, sweet, roasty, nutty, woody. There's just no other tea like it in my experience. I mean, it's so alive too. It's very vibrant, kind of buzzy. It pops with flavor. We haven't brewed this tea in a while purposely. I wanted to wait for this particular tasting, but also, so now these leaves, okay, they were harvested in early November. It was roasted in January, I believe. Perhaps February, but I would say January. So it's February, March, April, May, at least 4 months of sitting. That really does, like when a significantly roasted oolong tea ideally should be left for 3 months before drinking it, brewing and drinking it. And this is what we did with this batch intentionally. Okay, here's brew 5. Slightly lighter. Still the same flavor profile and just a tiny bit drier. So that's the one that went a longer time. It kind of makes sense that it's a little bit more intense in its astringency. This is one of my favorite parts. Brew 1, 2, 3, 4. After I poured 1 cup out, I poured the remainder into this mug. It's still much warmer than the individual cups. Very balanced. The nose is still as substantial. I think it's the temperature thing. Given that it's probably 5 degrees at least, maybe 10 degrees Celsius warmer, there's not as full as you don't get as much of the composition of the flavor as I tasted with the individual cups that are at room temperature basically now. It's still very pleasing. It's just a little less vibrant, I would say. It's delicious. It's sweet, nutty, with a tiny bit of tang, fruitiness in there too, with just a touch of smoke. I think our friend, he only enters, as opposed to other people we know, many other people we know who enter multiple batches of tea into the competition, if not dozens. That's the real players, the industry tea merchants. Enter, 15, 20 batches is not unusual. Our friend enters 1. He just decides, okay, he was a professional tea judge up until last year. He's now retired. They have to retire at 55 years old. So as a professional tea judge and a professional tea farmer and tea maker, I think he just feels like he has to play the game in order to maintain his professional status and reputation. This year, the other much more intense competition players who are more successful as a result of entering more and really working more professionally at it didn't do as well as him. In fact, the same batch of tea from another friend who is known for his skills and tea, the guy who processes this tea. Our friend manages the farm, another friend does the factory processing. He also is a master roaster. He wins prizes every year. He did not get high prizes this year because they all went for just a tiny bit different degree of roasting that they thought would be what would win the prizes. It's also another complex factor. It's not about what the judges decide in terms of, okay, this year we're going to do more roasted, next year, this year we're going to do less roasted. It's more about when they're tasting the tea, on a given harvest, particularly if it actually is tea leaves that were harvested on that season, there are people who use the previous season or whatever, though that really can't be controlled. If it is winter tea, as this was the winter competition, there's a certain constituency to the seasonal crop, and how that reacts to roasting, how the results are attained, vary from season to season. That's the real gourmet, like deep culture that's involved here. So the more professional, normally better ranking tea makers went for a standard that they thought would hit it, but the judges overall found that a slightly less roasted tea was the premium, really just hit the premium results, or the best results. So that's what our friend did. He roasted it just a smidgen less than his friends, and he won the top category prize. I love doing this, particularly with this type of tea. The leaves are cooled down now. I purposely didn't take them out of the teapot. Looking at roasted leaves is not as indicative as looking at unroasted leaves. They're discolored, or they're changed by the roasting, and it's just not that much as much to read. I should mention that the dry leaves. Let me just smell this for a minute. It's like the best campfire country kitchen smell you can imagine. I'm not even going to try to put names onto that. Please take the opportunity to smell. Don't burn your nose. Don't stick your nose in the teapot while it's scalding hot. I've done that. Try to control yourself and take care of your sinuses. But when the teapot, the teapot is cooled down enough, really take a good whiff of that smell of the brewed leaves. It's something to be enjoyed. Okay, dried leaves, very uniform in size. They're smaller. Okay, one of the things that happens with destemming is they're clippers. It's a row of clippers. And even though they separate it by infrared scanning somehow to move the tea leaves through different levels of clipping, the end result is that some of the nuggets get clipped in half, and there are smaller nuggets, basically broken nuggets, without their stems on them. So there are smaller pieces of the original overall nugget in this, but the visual coloration of the leaves is pretty much the same color, other than the remaining stem material being a little bit lighter golden compared with a darker you can see tiny bit of green in the dried leaves, but it's almost like a iron skillet color. And having said that, if I did take out the leaves here, the brewed leaves are definitely a greenish hue still. They're not overly roasted. In fact, they're not, it's just the only indicative aspect of roasting is that they're kind of shriveled and wrinkled. And they are darker than the original stock, but definitely still green. Oh yeah. Okay, I've talked enough. I've drunk too much tea, as it may be very obvious. Here we have it. Batch number 79 of the Eco Cha Tea Club roasted Shan Lin High Mountain Oolong Tea, the same batch as our winter 2021 batch. That won top category prize in the largest and most prestigious oolong competition in the world, coming at you Please leave your comments in the comment section of this video and or our blog posts. We'll see you next month.